I'm Julia Benton. I'm 36, and I should have let it go to voicemail. But the moment I heard Lindsay's voice, I knew I'd regret answering. The ring cut through the soft quiet of my apartment like a blade. I was curled up on the couch, blanket over my knees, snow falling outside like a promise of peace. Then the ringtone, the one I never changed, shattered it. I didn't look. I knew. Only one person still called me at this hour. Hey, I know it's late. She launched right in. No hello. No hesitation. Just another pitch for a startup that didn't exist beyond a Pinterest board and some essential oils. By the time she said, "Don't expect to be part of this family anymore if you won't help," the peace was already gone. And that was before Mom called. Before Christmas disappeared. Before I remembered that everything I'd given, to Lindsay, to my parents, came with an expiration date. I'm Julia Benton. I used to believe that love meant giving until you had nothing left, until I realized they weren't keeping score, because they never gave back. Before I show you what happened when I stopped apologizing for saving myself, comment below if you've ever had to choose peace over pleasing. And hit like and subscribe. This is for anyone who's ever been erased quietly and decided not to disappear. The ring had cut through the soft silence of my apartment like a knife. I was curled up on the couch, a wool blanket over my knees, a candle flickering on the coffee table, casting shadows against the frosted windows. Outside, the Chicago streets lay buried in snow, muffling the city's usual chaos into something that almost felt holy, peaceful, until now. I didn't even look at the screen. I knew the ringtone. Only one person still called me directly at this hour. Lindsay. I shouldn't have answered. But reflex is a funny thing. Julia? Her voice was sweet, sugary in a way that always made my stomach tighten. Hey, I know it's late. I bit back a sigh. What's going on, Lindsay? She launched right in, no preamble. A breathless pitch about a subscription box for monthly wellness rituals. Crystals, herbal teas, bath bombs. It's going to be huge, she said. We already have branding ideas, and Brian thinks we can hit $500,000 in year one if we move fast. I let her talk. I'd learned long ago not to interrupt her when she was on one of these streaks. My eyes drifted to the window, to the delicate snowflakes catching light from the street lamp. I could barely hear Brian in the background mumbling something that sounded like, "Tell her it's a family investment." When she finally paused for breath, I asked, "Do you have a business plan?" There was silence on the other end, then a scoff. We're in the early stages, obviously, but we're close to locking in a logo. A logo isn't a business plan. I kept my voice calm, measured. I'd learned that the more composed I stayed, the more it irritated her. That wasn't my goal, but it was the inevitable byproduct of our conversations. So you're saying no? Her tone shifted, less hopeful, more edged. I'm saying it's not something I can support. You're asking for $100,000, Lindsay. That's not pocket change. I thought you believed in me. I closed my eyes. I've believed in you a long time. I paid for your college, remember? That was different. Was it? You lived in my apartment rent-free for 3 years. I paid for your wedding. Because Mom and Dad couldn't. That doesn't mean you get to treat me like a bank. She went quiet again. Then, you know what? Don't expect to be part of this family anymore if you won't help. The line went dead before I could even reply. I sat there, stunned, the phone still warm in my hand. The candle's flame trembled. Outside, the snow kept falling. Julia stands in her dark living room, phone still in hand, whispering, "Did she really just say that?" The next morning, I expected silence. Instead, I got Mom. The smell of fresh coffee grounded me, if only for a moment. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in thin stripes, catching steam rising from my mug. My laptop was open, waiting for me to start the quarterly review I'd promised to send by noon. I had every intention of diving in, until the phone rang again. Same ringtone, same gut-tightening dread. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. "Morning, sweetheart." Her voice sounded gentle. Too gentle. I closed my eyes. "Hi, Mom." There was a pause loaded with the weight of someone rehearsing lines. Then she sighed, the kind of sigh that begged sympathy. She was up all night crying. I didn't ask who. I didn't have to. She really thought you'd support her, Julia. She believed in this idea. And in you. She's asking for 100 grand, Mom. For a concept she hasn't even tested. Well, everyone has to start somewhere. You know how hard it is for young people these days? Her voice climbed an octave. You're the one who always said family sticks together. My jaw clenched. I said that when I was paying Lindsay's tuition, when I covered her rent, when I bought her a dress for that job interview she skipped. A short silence. Then her voice lowered, almost trembling. Lindsay told me what you said to her, that she was irresponsible, that she didn't have a plan. That's because she doesn't. She's just passionate. She's trying. She paused again. You don't have to crush her. I looked out the kitchen window. Snow had stopped falling. The world looked still, frozen in place. Mom, I said quietly, I passed up a full scholarship so you and Dad could help Lindsay go to school. I stayed in state, worked part-time all through college, because you said she needed it more. I didn't complain. That was your choice, she said sharply. Don't hold that over us. I'm not. But you're asking me to keep giving. Like it's expected. Like it's owed. She's your sister. That's not an answer. I could hear her breathing, like the silence was laboring through the line. You always think you're better than us now, she finally said. With your money, your career. But you've lost something along the way, Julia. You used to be kind. I blinked hard. You'll understand what family means when you spend Christmas alone. The line clicked. I stood still for a long time. The coffee in my cup had gone cold. The laptop screen dimmed, forgotten. Julia hangs up, numb. She glanced at the growing pile of wrapped gifts in her hallway and wonders who they're really for. I never imagined I'd hear the words, "You're not invited." But there they were, like a slap I didn't see coming. I was halfway through folding laundry when the phone buzzed again. For a heartbeat, I thought about letting it go, but curiosity, or maybe defiance, pushed me to answer. Hello? My voice was flat, measured. It was her again. Mom. Hi, Julia. No endearment this time, just my name, clipped in neutral. I won't take long, she said. I just wanted to let you know, Lindsay doesn't think it's a good idea for you to come to Christmas this year. I paused, sock in hand, breath caught somewhere between chest and throat. What? She feels it would make things uncomfortable. She feels? I repeated, voice tightening. Mom, are you seriously disinviting me from Christmas? No one's disinviting you, she said too quickly. It's just that, under the circumstances, we all thought, well, your father agrees, it's probably best. I see, I said, though I didn't. Not really. I stood motionless in the middle of my living room, surrounded by soft shadows and half-folded clothes. The corner still held the pile of wrapped gifts, like loyal soldiers waiting for orders that would never come. Is this really what we've come to? I asked, quieter this time. After everything? We're not choosing sides, she said firmly. You did when you said no. There it was, the clean cut. I could almost hear the division crystallize, like ice cracking across a frozen lake. I walked to the window, phone still pressed to my ear, and stared down at the street. A couple pulled a toddler in a red sled, laughing. A delivery man balanced a stack of boxes as he shuffled toward a brownstone across the way. Do you remember? I said. When I helped Lindsay with her first apartment lease? When I paid Dad's car repair last year without asking for a dime back? That's not the point, she snapped. You bring up what you give like it's ammunition. That's not family. No, Mom, that's not your version of family. There was silence on the line. I thought she might apologize. I wanted her to, but she didn't. Maybe this time apart will help you think about what kind of person you've become. Click. The line went dead. I stood in the dark a moment longer, still staring out the window, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Then, slowly, I turned to the stack of gifts, wrapped in ribbons, tagged with names. I walked over, opened a drawer, and pulled out a box cutter. Julia stares at the untouched gifts and picks up a box cutter. She begins slicing them open, not to give, but to return. No Christmas tree, no laughter, no family, but for the first time I felt peace. The world outside my window was hushed, blanketed in thick white snow, as if even nature had agreed to stay silent. I sat in bed longer than usual, wrapped in flannel sheets, my phone glowing softly beside me. No alarms, no calls, just a blinking notification from Instagram. I tapped it out of habit. Lindsay's face filled the screen, overly lit by twinkling lights and the filter that made her eyes look unnaturally bright. Her arm around Mom, both of them beaming. The caption, "Surround yourself with people who matter. Merry Christmas." For a second, I did nothing. Then I exhaled, slow and deep. Last year, I had driven 4 hours in a snowstorm to hand-deliver custom pajamas I had ordered for everyone. They wore them, posed together for the family photo, then posted it online without me in it. Just the Benton family. I'd taken the picture. Today would be different. By 9 a.m., I was pulling into the small lot behind the apartment complex I technically still owned. Lindsay and Brian's name might have been on the mailbox, but every inch of that lease, the deposit, the HOA fees, I paid for all of it. They never transferred ownership. They never even asked. I didn't knock. I used my own key. The door clicked open without resistance. Inside, the place smelled like spiced candles and stale coffee. A few gift bags were haphazardly stacked near the door. One of them still had the tag I had written last year. To Lindsay and Brian, love always, Julia. I didn't touch it. Instead, I opened the hall closet and started packing. It was methodical, a kind of cleansing. Every pair of shoes, every unwashed blanket, every half-used bottle of shampoo, I placed into labeled boxes. Kitchen, bathroom, bedroom. I even included a list inside each, typed and printed. At noon, I met the storage company manager in a half-empty facility 10 blocks away. He wore a Santa hat and seemed grateful for the distraction. 1 month prepaid, I said, sliding over my card. After that, it's up to them. Back at the apartment, the locksmith arrived a few minutes later. I offered him a coffee from the machine that still ran in the corner. "You sure you want to replace both locks?" he asked, half joking. I nodded. Front and back. No copies. The clicks of his tools were satisfying. Precise. Final. When he handed over the new keys, I pocketed one and placed the other in an envelope marked Unit 307, storage address inside. I slid it through the apartment's mail slot before I left. At home, the silence was different. Not cold, not empty. Just mine. I poured myself a glass of champagne, left over from New Year's Eve 2 years ago, and walked to the couch. My laptop pinged with an incoming FaceTime from Allie. "Merry Christmas," she said with a lazy grin. "Wait, you look different." I smiled, leaning back into the cushions. I just cleared 60 pounds of emotional debt. She laughed, not asking questions. That's the thing about true friends. They don't need all the details to understand the relief in your voice. We talked about nothing and everything for 10 minutes, then hung up. Later, as I closed the laptop, a new email appeared in my inbox. From Brian. Subject line: "What the hell did you do?" I stared at it for a moment, then clicked the 3 dots and marked it as unread. I shut the lid with a gentle snap and leaned back, my champagne still cool in hand. I knew they'd show up eventually. What I didn't expect was how desperate they'd look. It started with a pounding knock. Sharp, uneven, the kind that didn't wait for permission. I had been sipping tea, curled into the corner of the couch, watching snow begin to melt along the edge of the window pane. The tea cooled in my hand as I stood, walked slowly to the door, and opened it. Lindsay. Brian, my mother, and unexpectedly, my father. They stood in a jagged row, bundled in coats, faces blotched from cold or emotion. I couldn't tell. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lindsay burst forward, hair windblown, eyes wide with fury. "You threw away our lives," she screamed, brushing past me without invitation. Brian followed, muttering curses under his breath. Mom came next, holding her purse close like it might shield her from accountability. Dad lingered by the threshold before finally stepping inside. I shut the door behind them and turned slowly. Lindsay stood in the center of the room, spinning in place as if expecting something to burst from the shadows. "You think you can just box up our stuff like we're garbage? Send us to a storage unit like we don't matter?" "You didn't even leave a note," Brian snapped. "I left an address," I said calmly, walking toward the kitchen counter. I picked up the envelope I had prepared days earlier, Brian's email printed inside. I slid it across the table. "You want a note? There's your note." Lindsay snatched it, tore it open, eyes darting across the page. "This is petty, spiteful." "You lived in that apartment for 3 years," I said, voice steady. "Never paid rent. Never paid utilities. I covered your security deposit, HOA fees, even the damn exterminator when your kitchen got roaches." "We were starting out," Lindsay shouted. "That's what family does." I turned to face her fully. "Starting out? You've been starting out for a decade." Margaret stepped forward, hands shaking. "We were trying to give you space, Julia. After your reaction, we thought it best." "Space?" I cut in, laughing once, flat and hollow. "You told me I wasn't invited to Christmas. You posted about people who matter. You chose your golden child again. Don't gaslight me into believing you were being generous." Her lips trembled. "That's not fair." "Fair?" I reached under a stack of papers and pulled out a folder. "Here." One by one, I laid them out. Lindsay's tuition receipts from Northwestern, $48,000 paid from my account. Wedding invoices, $19,700, including the venue deposit I never got back. Dental surgery for Mom, $3,200. Car repairs for Dad, $2,100. "I've kept every receipt," I said. Not for reimbursement, but for clarity. Because someday I knew I'd need to remind myself that I wasn't the cold, selfish daughter you made me out to be. No one spoke. Lindsay's arms were crossed now, but her posture slumped. Brian looked at the floor. My mother's hand went to her chest as if to quiet some imagined wound. Then I turned to my father. He hadn't said a word. "You stayed silent while they erased me," I said, voice tight. "You let them shame me for not being generous enough while I was the only one giving. You watched it happen. You let it happen. You called that family?" His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came. Then he looked away. I walked to the door, opened it wide. Cold air swept into the room, cutting through the heat like truth. "Get out," I said, clear and precise. "This is no longer your home, or your excuse. Freedom doesn't come wrapped in ribbons. It comes when you stop apologizing for choosing peace." The first Monday of January carried a strange calm. No holidays, no tension, just the soft tick of the wall clock and the hiss of my kettle boiling. My apartment, once cluttered with resentment and obligations, now breathed. Clean lines, open space, everything where it should be. I slipped on my coat, grabbed a folder of documents, and headed to the rental office. A couple in their late 20s, Casey and Mateo, were already waiting inside. She wore a burgundy scarf. He had a nervous smile. "This place is beautiful," Casey said as I handed her the keys. They asked a few questions about parking and trash pickup, then signed the lease without fuss. No assumptions, no entitlement. just a quiet gratitude that warmed the room. Afterward, I walked 2 blocks to a little boutique I always passed but never entered. Inside, I wandered for 20 minutes, running my fingers over soft throws and scented soaps. I wasn't looking for anything in particular until I saw it. A simple silver bracelet, delicately engraved. It wasn't flashy, but it gleamed. I bought it without hesitation. Back home, I kicked off my shoes, poured a fresh cup of tea, and sat on the windowsill bench. My phone buzzed. A message from Lindsay. "Can we talk?" "We're struggling." I read it once, then locked the screen. I didn't need to answer. Not today. Another ping followed. This time, a Facebook notification. Mom had posted a photo from Christmas, her and Lindsay in matching red sweaters. The caption read, "Some daughters forget who raised them." I didn't flinch, didn't ache, just sighed. On the coffee table sat a wrapped package addressed to no one. I opened it slowly. The bracelet shimmered in the early light. I slipped it onto my wrist and turned it, letting it catch reflections from every angle. Then I picked up a new journal, hardbound, deep blue, pages still smelling of factory ink. On the first line, I wrote, "This year, I give myself back to myself." The pen glided across the paper, smooth and sure. No hesitations. No need to explain. Later, as twilight settled in, I lit a candle by the window. The flame flickered softly, casting golden patterns across the glass. Outside, snow had begun to fall again. Gentle, indifferent, pure. Maybe someday they'll change. But I already did. I used to believe that family was a debt I owed, one I could never finish paying, no matter how many checks I wrote or favors I granted. Every time I covered Lindsay's tuition, hosted her in my apartment, bailed her out of yet another visionary disaster, I told myself it was what big sisters did, that it meant something, that it would one day be remembered the way I remembered it. But when the phone went silent after I said no, and the invitation vanished without warning, I realized the balance had never been even. Not once. Christmas came and went without me. No matching pajamas, no forced laughter over dry turkey, no stinging comments disguised as concern. Just the quiet hum of my heater, the scent of pine from a candle I bought for myself, and the slow unwinding of a woman who had spent too many years twisted into who her family needed her to be. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It didn't hollow me out like I expected. Instead, it cleared space. Enough for stillness, for clarity. When I packed up Lindsay and Brian's belongings and watched the locksmith change the locks, I didn't feel cruel. I felt surgical, precise. Like someone removing a tumor that had gone undiagnosed for years. Their things went to storage. Their messages went unread. Their outrage echoed but never reached me. And then they came. All of them. At once. With red cheeks and loud voices and the kinds of apologies that start with "but." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I laid out receipts like a prosecutor. Dates, dollar amounts, screenshots. Evidence not of love, but of pattern, of exploitation. Even my father couldn't meet my eyes. When I closed the door on them, I didn't just shut them out, I stepped out. Of a role, of a trap, of a lifetime of thinking that being useful meant being loved. Now the apartment holds new tenants. Young, kind, excited. I kept their first rent low, because I remember what it feels like to be starting over, and because they never asked for anything they didn't earn. I don't know what Lindsay's doing now. I assume she's still crafting captions about family first while blocking her landlord's number. Mom keeps posting veiled swipes online. But that's no longer my circle to orbit. The silver bracelet on my wrist catches the light as I write. I bought it for myself. My first Christmas gift chosen with no one else in mind. It doesn't sparkle much, but it's mine. In my new journal, under the first entry, I wrote a second line today. Some stories don't need applause, just an ending, and I gave myself that ending. Some betrayals come wrapped in smiles and holiday sweaters, whispered under the guise of family and obligation. Julia Benton spent years mistaking sacrifice for love, until the day she stopped apologizing for saving herself. Justice, when earned through dignity and resolve, never needs to shout. It stands unshaken, holding every quiet proof of survival. Those who built thrones on guilt and entitlement eventually learn. The silence of someone who's done is louder than any protest. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but once it plays, it echoes. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If you've ever been told that saying no made you selfish, if you've ever been erased, then blamed for disappearing, know this: your peace is not a betrayal. Your boundaries are not cruelty. They're proof that you finally chose yourself. Leave a comment if you've ever had to walk away to be whole again. Like this video if you know that justice doesn't always need a courtroom, just clarity. And subscribe for more stories like Julia's. Quiet, powerful, and true. My name is Maya Hart. I'm 29 years old. I've paid someone else's mortgage for almost a year. And last month, they changed the locks while I was at work. No warning. No text. Just 3 trash bags on the porch. One of them had my winter coat inside. I wasn't broke. I wasn't unemployed. I wasn't a failure. I was just convenient. The one who had savings. The one who understood. The one who didn't complain. Until she did. But here's the thing about being the reliable one. Once they realize you'll sacrifice everything, they stop pretending to protect anything. Today, I'm sitting in a 1-bedroom apartment with crooked cabinets, a half-working dryer, and more peace than I've had in years. I don't miss the noise. I don't miss the guilt. I miss the version of me that stayed quiet to keep the family calm. But she's gone now. And what came after is finally mine. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. And if you've ever been the one who gave everything until there was nothing left, stay. Because this story isn't about revenge. It's about release. It was already dark out when I stepped into my coat, the click of the front door behind me feeling heavier than usual. My apartment had been unusually quiet that night. Just me, leftover pad thai, and Zillow listings open in another tab. I'd been obsessing over them for months. Tiny 2-bedroom units in Logan Square, maybe a fixer-upper in Avondale. Nothing fancy, but it would be mine. After rent and groceries, every extra cent I made went into that down payment fund. I wasn't rich, just disciplined. But somehow, in my family's eyes, that made me different. That made me responsible. The drive from downtown to Plainfield took nearly an hour. I didn't even have the radio on. It was May, and the air still carried that damp spring chill that made everything feel unsettled. I pulled into the driveway, noticing right away how dim the porch light had become. Like even the house was tired. Mom was waiting inside, arms outstretched, her perfume as overwhelming as ever. "You made it," she said. Her hug lingered too long. "What's going on?" I asked, scanning the living room. Dad was slumped in his recliner, the TV flickering some muted sitcom. He didn't even turn his head. That wasn't a good sign. Mom led me to the kitchen like it was a stage and we were about to perform. "Your father got let go. Last week," she said, as if letting the words out was like opening a wound. I looked toward Dad, but he avoided my eyes. "I'm sorry. Are you okay?" I asked him. He gave a small nod. No words. "And my back's gotten worse," Mom continued, placing a hand on her lower spine like she needed proof. "I can barely move most mornings." I waited. I could feel the ask building behind every sigh. "We've fallen behind," she said finally. "On the mortgage, utilities too." My fingers instinctively curled around the strap of my purse. "How far behind?" She hesitated. "Almost 3 months." Silence stretched between us. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. "We didn't want to worry you," she said, managing to sound both noble and manipulative in the same breath. "But we really need help, just for a while. A few months, maybe." "How much is the mortgage?" Mom exchanged a glance with Dad. 1,800 a month. That familiar swell of pressure gathered behind my ribs. $1,800 wasn't an impossible amount, once. But monthly? With what I made? That was a second household. That was my savings plan in a coma.